My name's James Piercy. I was in a car accident in 2011. I suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. I asked people afterwards if I changed, what's happened, and they said, well, James, you tell more dirty jokes than you used to, and you cry a lot more. So there were some kind of changes. I was in a coma for about a week. I was in hospital for about 2 months. And about 6 months after the accident, I stood up in front of a room like this and talked about what had happened to me. And you probably think that's a bit weird. That is a bit weird. But I did it because my job at the time was to talk to people about science and engineering. And it made perfect sense to me to talk about what I'd learned about brains and what had happened to me. And then that's what I've been doing kind of ever since, really. So I do lots of work to try and raise awareness of what brain injury is like and what the impacts are. We know that about every 90 seconds somebody goes to hospital in the UK with a head injury. We know that there's about 1 million people living with the long-term consequences of brain injury in the UK. We need to talk about that stuff because often you can't see it. It's a kind of hidden disability. I'm a trustee for UKBIF, the United Kingdom Acquired Brain Injury Forum, and I'm working with that organisation and others, again, to raise awareness and to get more sort of lived experience and voice out into things. And I've had the great pleasure over the last sort of 10 years or so of meeting a lot of people who have suffered brain injuries, and finding out about their experiences and also their families. Excuse me. What happens beyond just that individual? What's the wider kind of impact of these things? Which is why it's fantastic that Lauren is able to join us today. And I thought we'd just have a chat, really, and kind of think about our kind of shared experiences. So, Lauren, your brother suffered a brain injury. Can you just tell us briefly what happened to him?
Yeah, I don't know. Am I working? Is this working? No.
Unmute button.
Is that? Yeah, now working,
Right.
sorry. Simple button.
So, what happened?
So Tom was 22 at the time of his accident. He was on a night out with his friends in Congleton. It's quite local to here. I'm sure some of you that are local will know it. And he was crossing the road. A car came round the corner and stopped. So, because there was a group of them in the road, it was going slowly, the car stopped. My brother, for some unknown reason, which we still don't know why to this day, having had a few beers, sort of stood in front of the car and went like this over the bonnet. The driver then accelerated, so Tom was flipped over the top of the car. As a result, he fractured his skull in 3 places and had bleeding on the brain, and obviously, as a result, the brain injury. So.
Wow. So, a catastrophic injury completely out of the blue. And one can only imagine that for the family, the policeman knocks on the door and you get the phone call and instantly everybody's world
I was actually enjoying a lovely weekend in Dublin at the time and woke up, so it was completely out of the blue. I think my mum and my dad both had phone calls from his friends at it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, completely unexpected. I obviously flew home as soon as I could to get there because we were sort of told it could go either way, really. At that point, we didn't know.
Yeah, lots of kind of uncertainty, and the same for my family. The policeman sort of knocked on the door, and my dad threw up, having not driven that fast in a flashing lights police car before. So Tom is rushed to hospital. Mm-hmm. Presumably, he's in a coma for a period of time, and there's no kind of knowing kind of what it's going to be like.
2 weeks he was in the coma for. I think during that time they tried to bring him round 3 or 4 times, but he was quite agitated. At one point he had a lovely pair of boxing mittens that he was sporting. So it took a while to get him sort of settled enough that they could wake him properly.
Yeah, and then I guess what's happened? So he comes off the sedation, waking up, and then there'll be lots of kind of tests and examination to find out what kind of thing. So were there physical injuries? Did he have a problem with movement, walking, anything like that?
No, nothing like that at all. With Tom, his injuries were, it was his personality, it was his social skills. He became very disinhibited. He was racist, he was sexually inappropriate. I remember there was one time that we were visiting and he asked my mum to perform a sexual favour to him. Horrifying really at the time.
And how did the family react to that? Obviously, enormously shocked.
Yeah.
But that's not the Tom that you know and love.
Yeah. So, the Tom that we know is, he's a larger than life character. He's the sort of person that he walks into a room and he's there. He's a rugby player. He's 6'4". He's built for not speed, power. He's a big lad. So to see him like that, and I think he lost 3 stone in 6 weeks. So to see him like that, and then sort of saying those things, and he almost went back to being a child. Go and get us my Xbox, Mum. Get me the Xbox. I want to go upstairs, because he didn't know where he was.
Yeah.
I want to go upstairs and play on my Xbox. Go on, Mum, go and get it for me. And just very...
Yeah, so just quite... I'm kind of interested in what the wider impact on your family is from those kinds of behaviours. So presumably you go in, you have a little chat, because you love the guy, you want to be with him and near him, and then something shocking happens. And you come back out of that space, and what happens? Was everybody in the family sort of in agreement that he'll get over this and he'll be better? Were some people like, we don't want to know this guy anymore because it's frightening?
No, I think we all very much hoped that this would get better and that things would get better. But I think we were sort of trying to be realistic as well, that it might not do, and that this might be Tom's future. This might be as good as it was going to get for him. And
what sort of information could the doctors give to you? Could they say, 6 months you'll be fine, or was it a bit...
A little bit like that, and that's not a criticism of anybody at all, I suppose. How could they? No, because everybody recovers from these injuries completely differently. You could have one person with exactly the same type of injury that Tom has, recover in a completely different way, and have a completely different sort of future.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah, I think there's a saying, isn't there? You've seen one brain injury, you've seen that one.
Yeah.
Because the outcomes are so enormously varied. There's some interesting research a while ago from America. If you've been to university, you make a better recovery from traumatic brain injuries. Okay, it was worth that chemistry lecture. I think it was. Yeah, probably. Of course it was. So, what happened a bit longer term? Presumably Tom's in hospital for a significant period of time and then home?
Well, yeah, I think he was in hospital for about 6 weeks, really, which doesn't feel that significant. And then he was sort of, he's ready to go home. I think we, as a family, probably underestimated his level of need still at that point, because when you hear, he's ready to go home, you think, great, he's, we're getting there, we're getting back to, but he wasn't, I think my mum described it as like living with somebody with advanced Alzheimer's. He would leave the grill on, he, was over familiar with people, he was still inappropriate, and had a very inflated sense of what his own abilities were as well, and it could be quite argumentative when he was sort of trying to explain, well, no, Tom, you can't do that, that's not safe, we need to make sure that Tom didn't have any perception that there was anything wrong with him at all, and he thought that we were all mollycoddling, I suppose.
I was going to ask that question about his kind of degree of insight. So you think he just thought he was fine and wasn't aware that he was being inappropriate? Or?
Yeah, no, he had no. My mum has a catering business, a catering van, and I think when he initially came out, she took some time off, and then she said, well, do you want to come with me, Tom, and I'll take you with me. And I think that lasted about 2 days, and he was just completely inappropriate with the customers. And so then he had to go over to my elderly grandparents' house to sort of be monitored there, which went down like a lead balloon, because I didn't know what to do.
I had a similar. My mum moved in with me and the kids. It was awful for both of us. It very nearly destroyed our mother-son relationship. You don't want to live with your mum when you're 39. Really, really not. So, I forgot what I was going to say. So what kind of assessments was he having, sort of in hospitals before he left and when he was home? Were they doing sort of psychological, psychiatric testing on sort of memory and function?
I can't remember in hospital. I know that when he came home, about 6 months after he'd been home actually, he was visited by I want to say a neuropsychologist. Now I may have got that completely wrong.
Sounds likely.
And we had some input from Headway as well, but Tom wouldn't engage with that because there was nothing wrong with him, so he didn't want to see the lovely lady from Headway that was coming to offer support and try and help him get that understanding of his injury and, you know, what the long-term effects may be.
But could the family take advantage of that? Could they work with sort of Headway counsellors and others to kind of try and understand what was happening?
My mum did in particular, because Tom was living with her at that time, but my mum sort of utilised the support from Headway a lot more than Tom himself did.
I remember my own sort of neuropsych assessments, because I'm a bit weird. I sort of was memorising how to spell the word world backwards before I went in the room, right? Because they're going to ask you that and you don't want to get it wrong again. And I'll tell you a joke, because I remember once a woman came in, she sat on the end of my bed. She said, I'm going to do a little test. It's about sort of verbal fluency and recall. She said, I want you just to say words that start with the letter P. I said, okay, go on then. She said, you've got a minute. I said, okay, go. Penguin, perhaps, pickle, and then I completely dried up, right? It felt like 20 minutes, didn't say anything. Well, the whole test only a minute, it can't be very long. I looked right at her and I said, plump. And then my mind is racing, right? And I say, pretty. Not helpful, James, not helpful. But I was aware, I did have insight, unlike Tom, so I knew that I was having problems with my speech sometimes. I knew that I was having a bit of trouble walking sometimes, a bit of kind of awareness. But I also was already, immodest now, quite clever. So since I was about 6, we played a game in our family where you have a list of different categories and you have to write down one of each thing that starts with a different letter of the alphabet. So if you do me a test where you have to name animals that start with letters of the alphabet, I'm good at that, right? And I'm going to be above the baseline, even though for me, I'm much worse. And I wonder whether you sort of found those kinds of things with Tom. Were there things that he was really good at before and now a bit meh, but actually still functional? So he could still do some things, but not to the degree that he could before.
Yeah, I mean, his memory, as you say, I think there were elements of it where it was poor, but actually he managed to observe the nurses putting the keypad code in to exit the ward and managed to leave the ward with nobody noticing. So he ended up with a little security tag around his ankle.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it, things like that, because that's a win, right? That shows real processing and planning and memory, and it should be, right? That is a kind of success, right, to do that stuff. So, Lauren, I know that professionally you work in sort of mental health areas, and I'm wondering whether, was there stuff that from your professional life that helped you to understand what was going on, or did it just sort of sit in a completely separate box?
I think I kept it in a separate box because I think it's so different when it's you and it's your family and you're watching this person that you've grown up with, because I'm the eldest one, so I've known Tom all his life, and he is my best friend and we know each other inside out. We can tell by looking at each other if there's something wrong. And I don't think that my professional background would have helped in that situation at all to even try and bring any of that in, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We sort of compartmentalise things, don't we, like that? And so here's this guy, you look at each other, you know what you're thinking, and now you don't, because he's different. That must have been, for you personally, really quite difficult to cope with that change in personality.
Yeah, I think it's like a grieving process, because you sort of looking at this person and it still looks like Tom, albeit 3 stone skinnier, but still looks like him. But he's just not there. He's not. Tom as a person is very quick-witted, very can turn anything into a joke, and he just lost.
Yeah, so a complete kind of shift in identity, really. But presumably, because he lacks insight, he's not grieving for the old Tom.
No.
So there's a real change. But so, what about longer term? So after sort of 6 months, did he see a change? Did he start to go back the way that he was before, a bit more as recovery happened, or did it stay that way?
Yeah, so I think for a while afterwards, he was in denial, and then he saw this neuropsychologist about 6 months after the injury, who said that Tom had recovered in 6 months, how they would typically expect to see somebody recover in 18 months. And I think they said, similar to yourself, that they only see that type of recovery in somebody who is very intelligent or is very fit. I personally wouldn't describe Tom as either of those things, but there we go. So I think he returned to work at that point, but couldn't drive because the DVLA revoked his licence at that point. So we were having to ferry him to work. My grandparents were involved and shipping him off to work in Holmes Chapel, so it was quite a drive. And he went on a night out with his friends, much to our, displeasure really. But I think even at that point, he still wasn't Tom. He had a girlfriend at the time of his injury, and I think she bore the brunt of it really. He was quite unpleasant. He wasn't very nice to her. He was going out and talking to other girls and just not things that Tom would do normally. And I don't know, and I don't know if we will ever know whether that was because of the brain injury and that was part of the change, or was it because of the brain injury and he was back out and wanting to sort of...
Yeah, you've had a brush with your own mortality. That changes you, doesn't it? As well as the kind of structural and functional damage to the brain. That must make a difference.
Their relationship broke down, which was, very sad. I think I would say it was probably 18 months before we felt that Tom was more Tom again.
Yeah, and getting back together. So I was told something when I was in hospital that makes me really angry. I was told that after about 2 years, that's about as good as you're going to get. It's just a lie. We know there's lots of research in stroke and brain injury. That's just not true. Recovery is lifelong, but it slows dramatically. So where's Tom now? Has he continued to improve after that sort of 18 months? He's starting to get there and back to normal. Still changing, still improving?
Yeah, I think we would all say that he's probably pretty much back to Tom. He's actually, I think about 6 months after he went back to work, he and his girlfriend got back together. They got married in August last year, and they have just announced that they are expecting their first baby.
Hooray! Isn't that good? And are there things that he still finds difficult? Fatigue is the massive one after brain injury. Is he coping back at work? I've met quite a few people who went back to work after sort of 6 or 8 months and then just failed because it was too hard, it was too difficult. Is he kind of coping with those kinds of things?
Yeah, he's done incredibly well, really. He's had promotions and, sort of excelled at what he does. Don't ask me what he does. He works for Vodafone doing some kind of something like that. Yeah. So yeah, he's done very well. I think if you asked him, the things he would say are that his tastes have changed. So like spicy food, he never used to like spicy food, didn't tolerate it well at all. Now quite enjoys a nice curry and other things that have got spice in them. And he can't handle his drink as well as he used to, would be the other thing he would say. Now whether that's an effect of the brain injury or whether that's just he's getting a bit older now.
Getting a bit
old. Turned 30, yeah.
Oh yeah, that can do it, can't it? And what about the impact on the wider family? Has it brought you as a family closer together to go through this experience?
I think so. I think initially there was lots of tensions, particularly when it was sort of talking about him coming home, because my mum and dad are divorced. My dad lives up in Ashton and Makerfield. My mum lives in Biddulph. So they each wanted Tom to go and stay with them. So it was sort of like I was a little bit piggy in the middle, and poor Tom was obviously piggy in the middle. And it, they were, well, I want him with me and I want him with me. But I think actually it has. I think we all sort of have that shared experience of going through that as a family. And I think it, you know, we've come through the other side of it quite fortunately, I think, compared to a lot of families as well. I've met lots of people where families have really struggled, where the friends of the person who's had a brain injury have just sort of gone because they can't cope and kind of not come back. We are just about out of time because I know it's coffee break. Is there any piece of advice you would give to other families who are likely to go through similar kinds of experiences? Do you think everything is so different you can't possibly, or is there some sort of general word of advice or a tip that you could give to others? I think it would be take every day as it comes and never forget the person that you knew before the brain injury, and always hold hope that that person will come back.
Lovely.
It can happen and it does happen.
What a nice way to finish. We're going to get that on a t-shirt. Never forget the person they were before the brain injury. Thanks ever so much, Lauren, for chatting to me. We could talk all day, but we've really got a break. And thanks for listening. Cheers.